A rugged Wyoming rancher with more land than he can work, and a freezing ranch house he barely fills, watches through a cracked window as a widowed mother serves her three starving children fried potato peels and calls it supper. That single moment shatters everything Caleb Mercer thought he knew about survival, wealth, and what it means to be a man. What starts as secret charity baskets left in the dark becomes a scandal that forces him to make the most reckless decision of his life, a public marriage proposal that turns an entire frontier town against them both. But when judgment rains down and the whole community demands answers, Caleb and Elena discover something more powerful than shame or hunger. The fierce, unbreakable kind of family you choose, not the kind you're born into. If you want to see how a lone wolf rancher and a desperate widow build something beautiful out of nothing but grit and second chances, stay with me until the end. And when you're done, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The wind cut through Iron Hollow like a blade, sharp enough to make grown men wince. Caleb Mercer didn't wince. He'd stopped feeling the cold years ago, the same way he'd stopped feeling most things. He guided his horse down the rutted main street, past the saloon with its busted sign swinging on one hinge, past the general store with its windows so caked in dust you couldn't see inside. The town was dying, had been for years. Most folks with any sense had already left. Caleb wasn't here because he liked the place. He was here because he needed supplies, and Iron Hollow was the closest thing to civilization within a day's ride of his ranch. He tied his horse outside Gunderson's mercantile and pushed through the door, the bell overhead giving a thin, tired chime. Inside smelled like coffee, leather, and something slightly rotten. Gunderson himself stood behind the counter, gray-bearded and sour-faced as always. "Mercer," Gunderson grunted by way of greeting. "Need flour, coffee, salt," Caleb said. "And nails. Got a fence section down." Gunderson nodded and shuffled toward the back, muttering under his breath. Caleb stood there, hands in his coat pockets, eyes drifting over the shelves. There wasn't much to look at. Half the stock was gone, the shelves showing bare wood in patches like a balding man's scalp. That's when he heard it, a woman's voice, low and strained, trying to sound cheerful. "Come on now, you three. Let's get home before it gets any colder." Caleb glanced toward the sound. Through the grimy window, he could see across the street to a narrow alley between two abandoned buildings. A woman stood there with three children clustered around her skirts. The kids were thin, too thin. The kind of thin that made their eyes look too big for their faces. The woman was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a braid that had seen better days. Her dress was patched in so many places, it was hard to tell what the original fabric had been. She carried a small burlap sack, and the kids kept looking at it like it held treasure. "Mama, is there bread tonight?" the smallest one asked. A boy couldn't have been more than 5. "Better than bread, Noah," the woman said, her voice bright in a way that didn't match her hollow cheeks. "We've got potatoes." "Again?" This from an older girl, maybe 10, with her mother's dark hair. "Clara, don't be ungrateful," the woman said, but there was no sharpness in it, just weariness. The middle child, a boy around 8, tugged on her sleeve. "Can we have butter this time?" The woman hesitated. Just for a second, but Caleb saw it. "We'll see, Ethan. Now come on." She ushered them down the alley, and they disappeared from view. Caleb turned back to the counter. Gunderson had returned with his supplies, piling them up with the care of a man who'd rather be doing anything else. "Who's that?" Caleb asked, jerking his chin toward the window. Gunderson didn't even look. "Widow Whitmore. Husband died 2 winters back. Timber accident up near the ridge." "She got people helping her?" Gunderson snorted. "Helping how? Town's barely keeping itself alive. She does wash work when she can get it, but there ain't much call for that these days. Most folks do their own. She got family?" "Not that stuck around." Gunderson pushed the supplies across the counter. "That'll be $4. Caleb paid, gathered his goods, and walked out. He stood on the boardwalk for a moment, looking down the alley where the woman and her kids had gone. The wind picked up again, rattling the loose boards under his boots. He loaded his horse and rode out of town, but he couldn't shake what he'd seen. The ride back to his ranch took 2 hours. The land spread out around him in shades of brown and gray, endless rolling hills dotted with scrub brush and the occasional stand of pine. His ranch sat in a valley with a creek running through it, good water, year-round. The house was solid, 2 stories, built from timber he'd cut himself. Barn, stable, storage sheds, fences that needed mending but held. Cattle scattered across the grazing land, enough to keep him comfortable. Caleb had built all of this alone. No partners, no hired hands he couldn't do without. Just him and the work. He unsaddled his horse, hauled the supplies inside, and set about making supper. Venison from a buck he'd shot 3 days ago. Potatoes. Bread he'd baked himself, dense and uneven, but edible. Coffee strong enough to strip paint. He sat at the table, plate in front of him, and stared at the food. Potatoes. Better than bread, Noah. We've got potatoes. He cut a piece of venison, chewed it, swallowed. It tasted like dust. He tried the potatoes. Same thing. That woman's voice wouldn't leave his head. The way she'd made it sound like a gift, like she was giving those kids something special, when all she had was a bag of damn potatoes. And the boy asking about butter, just butter, not even meat or sugar or anything fancy. And her not able to promise even that. Caleb pushed his plate away. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out over his land. He had more than he needed, more than he could use. And 5 miles away, that woman was probably frying potato peels and calling it supper. He thought about his own mother, the way she'd smiled even when there was nothing to smile about, the way she'd pretended everything was fine right up until the day she'd collapsed in the field and never got up again. Caleb had been 12. His father had already been dead 3 years by then. He'd sworn he'd never be hungry again, never be that helpless. And he wasn't. But standing there in his big empty house, surrounded by more food than he could eat in a week, Caleb Mercer felt something crack open inside his chest. Something he'd kept locked down for so long he'd forgotten it was there. He didn't sleep that night. Chit. Before dawn, Caleb was in the kitchen packing a basket. Bread, smoked meat, a sack of flour, coffee, a jar of honey, potatoes. The good ones, not the shriveled ones he'd been meaning to toss. He wrapped it all in a cloth, tied it tight, and loaded it onto his horse. The ride to Iron Hollow was cold and dark. He knew where the widow lived. Everyone knew where everyone lived in a town that small. It was a shack on the eastern edge, barely standing, with a roof that sagged in the middle like a broken back. He approached on foot, leading his horse, moving quiet. The sky was just starting to lighten, turning the world gray and formless. No smoke from the chimney yet. They were still asleep. Caleb set the basket on the doorstep, turned, and walked away. He was halfway back to his horse when he heard the door creak open. He froze. Didn't turn around. There was a long silence. Then the sound of the basket being lifted. The door closed again, soft as a breath. Caleb mounted his horse and rode home. Chet. He did it again 3 days later. Then again 4 days after that. Each time he left before dawn. Each time the basket was gone by the time he came back through town later in the day. On the 4th delivery, he found something waiting on the step where he'd left the basket. A small bunch of wildflowers tied with a scrap of ribbon. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he picked it up, shoved it in his coat pocket, and rode off. The next time, there was a drawing. Done in charcoal on a piece of brown paper. A bird perched on a branch, surprisingly detailed for a child's hand. The time after that, a carved wooden horse, small enough to fit in his palm. Rough, uneven, but clearly made with care. She was leaving him tokens. Not payment. She couldn't afford payment. These were something else. Acknowledgement, maybe. Or refusal to be pitied. Caleb didn't know what to make of it, but he kept leaving the baskets. It was on the 7th delivery that he saw her. He just set the basket down when the door opened. Not all the way, just a crack. Enough for him to see one dark eye watching him. Caleb straightened. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she opened the door wider. She looked worse up close, thinner than he'd realized, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Her dress was the same patched one he'd seen before, but she stood straight, chin up, meeting his gaze without flinching. "You're the one," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. Caleb nodded. "Why?" He didn't have an answer ready. He fumbled for words, felt them stick in his throat. Finally he said, "Seemed like you needed it." "I don't take charity." I noticed. He gestured to the flowers and drawings he'd collected. You pay me back every time. Her jaw tightened. Those aren't payment, they're just... She broke off, looked away. I won't be in debt to anyone. You're not. Then what do you call this? Caleb considered. Neighborly? She almost smiled. Almost. Neighbors don't live 5 miles apart. Out here they do. Silence settled between them. Somewhere inside the shack, one of the kids coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made the woman's shoulders tense. Your boy's sick? Caleb asked. He'll be fine. You got medicine? We manage. That's not what I asked. Her eyes flashed. I said we manage. Caleb held up his hands. All right. She looked at the basket, then back at him. Why are you really doing this? He could have lied. Could have given her some easy answer about Christian duty or just being helpful. But standing there in the pre-dawn cold, facing this woman who refused to break no matter how hard life pushed, Caleb found himself telling the truth. I watched my mother starve herself so I could eat, he said. Watched her work herself to death trying to keep us fed, and I swore if I ever had enough, I wouldn't let that happen to someone else. Not if I could stop it. The woman's expression shifted. Something in her eyes softened, just a fraction. I'm sorry, she said quietly. About your mother. Caleb nodded, didn't trust himself to say more. The woman bent and picked up the basket. Thank you, she said. For this. For all of it. You're welcome. She started to close the door, then paused. I'm Elena Whitmore. Caleb Mercer. I know who you are, Mr. Mercer. Everyone knows the man with the big ranch who never talks to anyone. Guess I'm talking now. That almost smile again. Guess you are. She closed the door. Caleb stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked back to his horse. As he rode away, he realized his chest didn't feel quite so tight anymore. He kept leaving the baskets. Once a week, sometimes twice, if he'd had a good hunt, or if the weather turned particularly brutal. And every time there was something waiting for him in return. More drawings from Clara, a carved bird from Ethan. Once a rock polished smooth by Noah, who, according to a note from Elena, thought it was the prettiest thing he'd ever seen. Caleb kept every single one. But as the weeks passed, he noticed something else. People were starting to talk. It started small. Gunderson at the Mercantile asking casually if Caleb had taken an interest in the widow. A woman at the post office giving him a knowing look. Then the whispers started spreading, the way they always did in small towns. By the time spring arrived, half of Iron Hollow seemed convinced Caleb and Elena were carrying on some kind of secret affair. Caleb heard the rumors but ignored them. He'd never cared what people thought before. He wasn't about to start now, but Elena heard them too. And unlike Caleb, she didn't have the luxury of not caring. It was late April when everything came to a head. Caleb rode into town for supplies and found the Mercantile buzzing with conversation. Gunderson and 2 other men stood near the counter, voices low but urgent. They went quiet when Caleb walked in. Mercer, Gunderson said, nodding. Gunderson, Caleb set his list on the counter. Need these by end of the week. Gunderson glanced at the list, then at the other men. You hear about the widow? Caleb's hand stilled. What about her? Church ladies paid her a visit yesterday, one of the other men said. His name was Porter, owned a failing dry goods store. Told her if she didn't want to lose those kids, she'd better start acting respectable. Caleb's blood went cold. Lose them? What the hell does that mean? Means they're talking about sending them to an orphanage, Porter said. Say a woman in her position can't provide proper care, especially with all the talk going around about her and, well, he glanced at Caleb. You know. That's horseshit, Caleb said, voice hard. She's doing everything she can for those kids. Maybe so, Gunderson said, but perception's a powerful thing, Mercer, and right now the perception is that she's a charity case at best and a scarlet woman at worst. Because I left her some food? Because you've been seen at her place multiple times before dawn. Gunderson leaned on the counter. Look, I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just telling you what's being said. Caleb's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Who's pushing this? The church ladies? Them and others. Townsfolk who think she's taking advantage. That she's got no business raising kids alone when there's proper families who could do it better. Proper families, Caleb repeated, voice flat. Like who? You? Porter here? Which of you stepped up to help when her husband died? The men shifted uncomfortably. Thought so. Caleb grabbed his list back. Forget the supplies. I'll get them somewhere else. He turned and walked out, fury burning in his chest. He didn't go home. He rode straight to Elena's shack. What? She was in the yard, hanging wash on a line strung between two posts. The kids were nearby, Clara reading to the younger two, all three of them huddled on a blanket in the weak spring sunshine. Elena looked up when she heard the horse. Her face went pale when she saw Caleb. Mr. Mercer, she said, hands twisting in the wet shirt she'd been hanging. You shouldn't be here, not in daylight. People will... I heard, Caleb said, dismounting, about the church ladies. Elena's face crumpled for just a second before she got it under control. It's fine. I'll figure something out. Like what? I don't know. The words came out sharp, brittle. She glanced at the kids, lowered her voice. But I will. I always do. They want to take your children, Elena. You think I don't know that? Her eyes shone with unshed tears. You think I haven't been terrified of that since the day Henry died? Caleb took a step closer. Then let me help. You've already helped. Too much. That's the problem. The problem is this town's full of cowards and hypocrites. Maybe, but they're the ones with the power to decide what happens to my kids. Elena wiped her eyes roughly. So I have to care what they think, even if you don't. Caleb stood there, wind tugging at his coat, mind racing. There had to be a way to fix this. Had to be something he could do that would shut down the gossip and keep those kids safe. And then it hit him. It was reckless, possibly the stupidest idea he'd ever had, but it was also the only one that might actually work. Marry me, he said. Elena stared at him. What? Marry me, Caleb repeated. Right now, today, in front of the whole damn town if we have to. You've lost your mind. Maybe, but think about it. If we're married, they can't say anything. You'll have a home, security, protection. The kids will be safe. Elena shook her head, backing away. No, you can't just... Why not? Because it's insane. You don't even know me. I know enough. You know I'm desperate, is what you know. Her voice broke. And you feel sorry for me. Is that so wrong? Yes. She pressed her hands to her face. Yes, it is, because I can't be someone's charity project, Caleb. I can't marry you out of pity. Then marry me out of practicality, Caleb said. It doesn't have to be about feelings. It can just be an arrangement. You need help. I can provide it, that's all. Elena lowered her hands. Tears streaked her cheeks. And what do you get out of it? Caleb hesitated. He could lie. Could make up something about wanting a wife, or liking the kids, or any number of half-truths that would make this sound more normal. But Elena deserved better than that. I get to know I did the right thing, he said quietly. That I didn't stand by and let someone suffer when I could have helped. That's enough. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned toward her children, watching them on the blanket. Clara had stopped reading and was looking back at them, worry creasing her small face. If I say yes, Elena said slowly, it's not because I love you. It's not even because I like you, though I do, a little. It's because I'm out of options, and you're the only one offering a way out. I know. And you're still willing. I am. Elena closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were clear, decided. All right, she said. I'll marry you. Caleb nodded. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by the realization of what he'd just committed to. We'll do it proper, he said. Tomorrow. At the church. With witnesses. Elena's mouth twisted. They'll never agree to it. They will if I make enough noise. Caleb looked toward the town in the distance. Let them try to stop me. The next day, Caleb rode into Iron Hollow with Elena and the 3 children. He'd given them the wagon, loaded with what few possessions they had. Elena sat rigid beside him, wearing the only good dress she owned, a dark blue thing that had seen better days but was clean and neatly mended. The kids sat in the back, wide-eyed and silent. They pulled up in front of the church. Word had already spread. Of course it had. Half the town stood gathered outside, watching with expressions ranging from shock to outrage to barely concealed glee. Reverend Thomas stood on the steps, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetual frown. "Mr. Mercer," he said, as Caleb helped Elena down from the wagon. "I heard you were coming. I'm afraid I can't—" "Can't what?" Caleb interrupted. "Perform a marriage? That's your job, isn't it?" "Under normal circumstances, yes, but—" "But what? We're both adults. Both unmarried, both willing. What's the problem?" Reverend Thomas glanced at the crowd, clearly uncomfortable. "The problem, Mr. Mercer, is the appearance of impropriety. There have been rumors, which we're putting to rest right now," Caleb said. "By getting married, legal and public. Seems like that should make everyone happy. It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple," Caleb's voice carried across the crowd. "Either you marry us, or I'll find someone who will. But one way or another, Elena Whitmore is going to be my wife by the end of today." A murmur rippled through the gathered townspeople. Caleb saw the church ladies clustered together, faces pinched with disapproval. Saw Gunderson watching with wary eyes. Saw Porter and his wife whispering furiously to each other. "Mr. Mercer," one of the church ladies stepped forward. "Surely you can see how this looks. The widow has clearly taken advantage." "Taken advantage?" Caleb turned to her. "How? By accepting food so her kids wouldn't starve? By doing honest work for anyone who'd pay her? Exactly how has she taken advantage of anyone?" The woman flustered. "Well, the children, she can't possibly—" "She's been raising those kids alone for 2 years," Caleb said, "doing a better job than most of you did with yours, from what I've seen. And the only reason any of you care now is because I decided to help. We have a responsibility." "You have hypocrisy," Caleb said flatly. "You watched her struggle and did nothing. Now you want to judge her for accepting help when it's offered? That's not responsibility, that's cruelty." Silence fell. The church lady's face went red, but she didn't respond. Caleb turned back to Reverend Thomas. "So, are you going to marry us or not?" The Reverend looked at Elena. "Mrs. Whitmore, is this truly what you want?" Elena lifted her chin. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "It is." "You're certain?" "I am," Reverend Thomas sighed. "Very well. If you're both determined, I won't stand in your way." He gestured to the church. "Shall we?" The ceremony was brief and awkward. Reverend Thomas rushed through the words like he was trying to get them over with as quickly as possible. The kids sat in the front pew, Clara holding Noah in her lap, while Ethan sat straight and solemn beside them. When it came time for the vows, Elena's hands trembled. Caleb held them gently, keeping his own voice firm. "I do," he said. "I do," Elena echoed. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you man and wife." Reverend Thomas snapped his book shut. "You may kiss the bride." Caleb hesitated. He and Elena looked at each other. This was supposed to be the romantic part, the sealing of their union. But there was nothing romantic about it, just two people making a deal to survive. Elena leaned forward and kissed him quickly on the cheek. Caleb's skin burned where her lips had touched. "Done," Reverend Thomas said. "Congratulations." They turned to face the small crowd that had filtered into the church. Most looked confused. Some looked angry. A few looked almost disappointed, like they'd been hoping for more drama. Caleb didn't care. He held out his arm and Elena took it. Together, with the 3 children trailing behind them, they walked out of the church and into their new life. The wagon ride to the ranch felt longer than the 2 hours it actually took. Nobody spoke. The children sat in the back, Clara with her arm around Noah, Ethan staring at the passing landscape like he was trying to memorize every rock and tree. Elena sat beside Caleb on the bench, hands folded in her lap, spine straight as a fence post. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. He could feel the tension radiating off her like heat from a stove. When the ranch house finally came into view, he heard Elena's breath catch. He'd gotten so used to the place he'd forgotten what it looked like to someone seeing it for the first time. The 2-story timber structure, solid and weatherproof, with glass windows that weren't cracked or covered in oilcloth. The barn and stable in good repair. Fences that actually held. Land that stretched out in every direction, More space than a family of 5 would need in 3 lifetimes. This is all yours? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ours now, Caleb said. The word felt strange in his mouth. He pulled the wagon up to the house and climbed down, then turned to help Elena. She hesitated before taking his hand, and he felt how cold her fingers were despite the spring warmth. The kids tumbled out of the wagon on their own, staring up at the house with identical expressions of wonder and fear. Is this really where we're going to live? Noah asked, tugging on his mother's skirt. Yes, Elena said. She looked at Caleb. If that's all right. That's why we're here, Caleb said. He grabbed the first of their bags, a battered canvas sack that weighed almost nothing. Everything they owned in the world probably fit in 4 trips. He led them inside. The front door opened into a main room with a stone fireplace, a dining table he'd built himself, and 2 chairs that didn't match. The kitchen was through an archway to the left. Stairs led up to the 2nd floor. There's 3 bedrooms upstairs, Caleb said, setting the bag down. I've been using the one at the end of the hall. You and the kids can take the other 2. Elena looked at him sharply. You and I aren't… No, Caleb said quickly. I figured you'd want your own space, at least for now. For now, Elena repeated, and he couldn't tell if she was relieved or insulted. The kids had already scattered, exploring. Noah ran to the fireplace, reaching out to touch the stones. Ethan stood by the kitchen archway, peering through like he expected something to jump out at him. Clara stayed close to her mother, watching Caleb with careful, measuring eyes. There's a pump in the kitchen, Caleb said. Well water, clean. Outhouse is out back, but I've been meaning to put in a proper privy. Chickens in the coop, if you want eggs. Pantry's through that door there. Elena nodded, taking it all in. Her hands had moved to her sides, fingers twisting in her skirt. You hungry? Caleb asked. I can fix something. We can manage, Elena said automatically. I know you can. I'm asking if you want to. Elena's jaw tightened. Then she shook her head. I need to settle the children first. Get them oriented. All right. Caleb headed for the door. I'll be in the barn if you need anything. He escaped outside before she could respond. In the barn, he stood there breathing in the familiar smells of hay and leather and horse, trying to get his bearings. What the hell had he just done? He'd married a woman he barely knew, taken on 3 kids, and turned his entire life upside down in the span of 24 hours. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Ethan standing in the doorway. Sir? The boy said hesitantly. You don't have to call me sir, Caleb said. Caleb's fine. Ethan nodded but didn't look convinced. Mama said I should ask where to put our things. The 2 rooms on the right, upstairs. You boys can share one, your sister gets the other. Your mama too if she wants, but there's space for her to have her own if she'd rather. Okay. Ethan didn't move. Something else? Caleb asked. The boy bit his lip. Are you really going to let us stay? The question hit Caleb harder than it should have. Yeah, you're staying. This is your home now. People said things, Ethan continued, his voice small. In town. They said Mama was… that she… He couldn't finish. Caleb crouched down to the boy's level. People say a lot of things. Most of it's garbage. Your mama didn't do anything wrong. Neither did you or your brother or sister. Anyone tells you different, you send them to me. Ethan searched his face, looking for the lie. When he didn't find one, something in his shoulders loosened. Yes, sir. Caleb. Go on back inside, Caleb said. Help your mama get settled. Ethan ran off. Caleb stood feeling like he'd just taken a test he hadn't studied for and somehow passed anyway. He stayed in the barn until sunset, finding work that didn't need doing just to give Elena space. When he finally came back to the house, he could smell food cooking. He stopped in the doorway, surprised. Elena stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot. The table had been set with mismatched plates and cups. The kids sat around it, cleaned up and waiting. Didn't have to cook, Caleb said. Elena glanced at him. We have to eat. Could have done it myself. I'm sure you could have. She ladled stew into bowls. His stew, he realized, the one he'd made 2 days ago and left in the cold box. She'd added things to it, though, vegetables he didn't remember putting in, herbs that made it smell better than it had any right to. They ate in silence. The kids were too nervous to talk much, and the adults didn't know what to say to each other. Caleb had spent so many years eating alone that having people at his table felt like being invaded. But he noticed things. The way Clara cut Noah's meat without being asked. The way Ethan ate slowly, like he was still afraid the food might disappear. The way Elena barely touched her own bowl, watching her children instead. "You need to eat too," Caleb said. Elena looked at him. "I'm fine." "You're not. Eat." Her eyes flashed with something, anger maybe, or just exhaustion, but she picked up her spoon and took a bite. After dinner, Elena ushered the kids upstairs. Caleb could hear water running, voices murmuring. He sat by the fire, trying to read a week-old newspaper and absorbing exactly none of it. Elena came back down an hour later. "They're asleep," she said. "All three of them. First time in weeks they went down without fussing." "Good beds?" Caleb said. "Yes?" Elena stood there awkwardly, hands clasped in front of her. "Thank you, for the rooms, for all of this." "You already thanked me." "I know, but She stopped, shook her head. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Be married to someone I don't know. Live in a house that isn't mine. Let my children depend on a man who could change his mind tomorrow." Caleb set the newspaper down. "I'm not going to change my mind." "You say that now." "I say it because I mean it." He stood, faced her. "I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you'd rather have done it on your own. But we made a deal, Elena. I'm going to keep my end of it." "And what is your end exactly?" Elena asked. "What do you expect from me?" "I expect you to take care of your kids. Make this place a home if you want. Or don't. I'm not asking you to love me or even like me. Just don't lie to me. And don't steal from me. That's all." Elena's laugh was bitter. "That's all? Just honesty and not being a thief? Your standards are remarkably low." "Maybe they are." "Why did you really do this, Caleb?" Elena moved closer, her eyes searching his face. "And don't tell me it's because you saw us hungry. There's more to it than that." Caleb looked away. "Does it matter?" "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I built all this by myself. Worked for 10 years, sunrise to sundown, barely stopped to sleep. Told myself I was doing it for me, that I didn't need anyone else. And then I woke up one day and realized I was 40 years old in a house big enough for a dozen people, and I was the only one in it. That's not a life. That's just existence." "So we're here to fill your empty house," Elena said flatly. "No, you're here because you needed help, and I needed—" He struggled for the words. "Purpose, I guess. Something that mattered more than just keeping myself alive." Elena studied him for a long moment. "You're an odd man, Caleb Mercer." "Been told that before." "I'm not going to fall in love with you," she said. "Didn't ask you to. And I won't pretend to be something I'm not just to make this easier for you." "Good. I don't want pretending." Elena nodded slowly. "All right then. We understand each other." "Seems like it." She turned to go upstairs, then paused. "The stew was good. Better than I expected." "You made it better," Caleb said. Elena almost smiled. Almost. Then she climbed the stairs and disappeared into one of the rooms, closing the door behind her. Caleb sat back down by the fire, listening to the house settle around him. It creaked and groaned in different places now, adjusting to the weight of 5 people instead of 1. He told Elena the truth. He wasn't going to change his mind. But he hadn't told her the whole truth, which was that he had no idea what he was doing or how to make this work. He'd lived alone for so long he'd forgotten how to be around people, let alone a wife and 3 children who looked at him like he might explode at any moment. This was going to be harder than he'd thought. The next morning started before dawn. Caleb woke to the sound of movement downstairs and found Elena already in the kitchen, building up the fire. "You're up early," he said. She jumped, startled. "I'm used to it. Had to get wash started before the children woke." "No wash to do here. I've been taking it to town." Elena stared at him. "You've been paying someone to do your wash?" "Seemed easier than doing it myself." "That's—" She shook her head. "That's wasteful. I can do it. Didn't ask you to." "Well, I'm going to anyway." Elena moved to the stove. "And I'm making breakfast. Do you have oats?" "Pantry," Caleb said. She disappeared through the door and he heard her rummaging around. When she came back, her arms were full of things: oats, dried apples, honey, cinnamon. How long have you had these? She asked. Some of it a while. Why? Because you've got enough food here to feed 6 families and half of it's just sitting there. She set everything on the counter. When was the last time you actually used your kitchen? Caleb shifted uncomfortably. I cook. Meat and potatoes, I'm guessing. Maybe some beans. What's wrong with that? Nothing, but you've got spices and flour and things that could actually make a meal interesting. Elena started mixing things in a bowl. Seems a shame to waste them. The kids came downstairs one by one, drawn by the smell of cooking. Clara helped set the table without being asked. Ethan fetched water from the pump. Even Noah tried to help, though mostly he just got in the way. They ate together again, and this time there was more talking. Noah chattered about the room he was sharing with Ethan, how big it was, how you could see the barn from the window. Clara asked quietly if there were any books in the house. A few, Caleb said. Mostly practical stuff. Farming guides, that sort of thing. Clara's face fell. But there's probably books in town you could borrow, Caleb added. Library's small, but it exists. Clara brightened. Really? We'll go sometime this week, Elena said. Then she glanced at Caleb. If that's all right. It's fine, Caleb said. You don't need to ask permission for everything. Don't I? Elena's tone had an edge to it. No. Strange. Most husbands I've heard of prefer their wives to check first. I'm not most husbands. No, Elena said. You're certainly not. Caleb couldn't tell if that was a compliment or an insult. After breakfast, he headed out to check the fences while Elena started on the wash she'd insisted on doing. Ethan followed him out. Can I help? The boy asked. Caleb hesitated. He wasn't used to company while he worked, but Ethan looked so hopeful, and turning him away felt cruel. You know anything about fence mending? Caleb asked. No, sir. Then I guess you're about to learn. They spent the morning walking the fence line, Caleb showing Ethan how to spot weak posts, how to test the tension on wire, how to make repairs that would actually hold. The boy was quiet, but attentive, soaking up every word. Your pa teach you ranch work? Caleb asked. Ethan shook his head. Pa was a timberman, worked up in the mountains most of the time. We didn't see him much. Your mama raised you mostly on her own then? Yeah. Ethan bent to examine a post the way Caleb had shown him. This one's rotted at the base. Good eye. Caleb pulled it free and set it aside. We'll replace it on the way back. They worked in comfortable silence after that. Caleb found himself relaxing. The boy didn't talk just to fill air, didn't ask questions he already knew the answers to, just worked. You're good at this, Caleb said eventually. Ethan looked surprised. Really? Really? You pay attention. That's half the battle. The boy's face lit up in a way that made Caleb's chest tighten. When they got back to the house around noon, Elena had wash hanging on lines she'd strung between posts. Clara sat on the porch with Noah, reading to him from one of Caleb's farming guides. The little boy looked bored out of his mind, but was trying to pretend otherwise. That's not much of a story, Caleb said. Clara looked up. It's all there was. Hold on. Caleb went inside and rummaged through a trunk in his room. He came back with a thin, battered book and handed it to Clara. Try this. She took it carefully. Treasure Island? My mother's, Caleb said. Only book she ever owned. Read it to me when I was about your age. Clara opened it, handling the pages like they might crumble. Are you sure? Wouldn't have given it to you if I wasn't, Clara's eyes shone. Thank you. Caleb nodded and retreated before she could say anything else. That night at dinner, Clara read aloud from Treasure Island while they ate. Her voice was clear and steady, bringing the story to life in a way that made even Noah sit still and listen. Elena watched her daughter with an expression Caleb couldn't quite name, pride mixed with something that looked like grief. After the kids went to bed, Elena helped Caleb clean up from dinner. They moved around the kitchen in awkward choreography, neither quite sure where the other would be. Clara loves that book, Elena said, scrubbing a pot. Good. It should be read, not sitting in a trunk. It was your mother's. That makes it important. All the more reason to use it, Caleb said. My mother would have wanted it to mean something to someone. Elena rinsed the pot and set it aside. You don't talk about her much. Not much to tell. She worked hard, loved me, died too young. Same story as a lot of people out here. Still, she mattered. Yeah, Caleb said quietly. She did. Elena dried her hands on a towel, then turned to face him. The town's going to keep talking. You know that. Let them. It's not that simple for me, or the children. What do you want me to do about it? Caleb asked. I don't know. I need you to understand that this isn't over. Getting married didn't fix everything. Didn't think it would. Then what did you think? Caleb met her eyes. I thought it'd buy us time, give you and the kids some stability while we figure out the rest. And what is the rest exactly? Surviving. Building something that lasts. Caleb shrugged. Same thing everyone's trying to do. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who wanted something from me. Men usually do. I told you what I want, Caleb said. Honesty. And for you not to steal from me. That's still all. You really mean that? I do. Elena shook her head slowly. I don't know whether that makes you the best man I've ever met or the strangest. Can't it be both? That surprised a laugh out of her. A real one. Not the bitter kind she'd been giving him. It transformed her face, made her look younger, less worn down by life. I suppose it can, she said. The days settled into a rhythm after that. Caleb worked the ranch with Ethan, shadowing him more often than not. Elena took over the cooking and cleaning, though Caleb noticed she always found ways to make it clear she was choosing to do it, not being forced. Clara devoured Treasure Island and started reading it a second time. Noah gradually stopped looking at Caleb like he was a stranger and started treating him like furniture. There, but not particularly threatening. But the tension in town didn't fade. If anything, it got worse. The first time Elena went into Iron Hollow alone, she came back tight-lipped and pale. She wouldn't say what happened, but Caleb could guess. The second time, Clara came home crying, and it took Elena an hour to calm her down. What did they say to her? Caleb demanded. Nothing I'm going to repeat, Elena said. And before you ask, no, I'm not telling you who it was. Why the hell not? Because you'll go into town and make it worse. Elena's voice was sharp. We have to live with these people, Caleb. Fighting them won't help. Neither will letting them treat you like dirt. I've been treated like dirt before. I survived. You shouldn't have to just survive, Caleb said. Elena looked at him with something that might have been gratitude or might have been frustration. That's a nice sentiment, but survival's all some of us get. Caleb wanted to argue, but he didn't know how to counter something that came from that much experience. 3 weeks into the marriage, things came to a head. Caleb had gone into town for supplies. He was loading the wagon when he heard raised voices from the church. Curious, he walked over. A crowd had gathered on the steps. At the center of it stood Reverend Thomas, Gunderson, Porter, and 3 of the church ladies, including the one who'd confronted them at the wedding. Cannot simply ignore the situation, one of the women was saying. Those children need proper Christian guidance. They have a mother, Gunderson said, and now a father, legally speaking. A father who married their mother in a rushed ceremony that reeked of scandal, another woman snapped. This is not a proper household. What makes it improper? Caleb called out. The crowd turned. The woman who'd spoken, Mrs. Helmsley, he remembered, lifted her chin. Mr. Mercer, how convenient. Perhaps you can explain why those children are being raised in a house with no moral foundation. They're being raised with food, shelter, and people who give a damn about them, Caleb said, walking closer. Seems like a pretty solid foundation to me. There's more to raising children than feeding them, Mrs. Helmsley said. They need spiritual instruction, proper education, and examples of righteous living. And they're not getting that because their mother is a woman of questionable character who trapped you into marriage through manipulation and... Careful, Caleb said, his voice going quiet and hard. Real careful about what you say next. Mrs. Helmsley's face flushed, but she didn't back down. The truth may be unpleasant, Mr. Mercer, but it remains the truth. That woman saw an opportunity and took it, and those poor children are suffering for it. The only people making those kids suffer are standing right here, Caleb said. Elena's done nothing but try to survive and protect her children. If that makes her questionable, then what does it make all of you who watched her starve and did nothing? We offered charity, one of the other women said. Multiple times, she refused. Because charity comes with strings, Caleb shot back. Like this conversation right here. You want to help? Actually help? Then stop spreading poison about a woman who's done nothing wrong. We have a responsibility to this community, Reverend Thomas said, speaking for the first time, to maintain certain standards. Standards? Caleb repeated. That's rich, coming from a town that let a widow and 3 kids nearly freeze and starve 2 winters running. We cannot force people to accept help, Reverend Thomas said, but you can force them to accept judgment, apparently. Caleb looked at each of them in turn. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave my wife and kids alone. You're going to stop gossiping, stop scheming, and stop pretending this is about morality when it's really just about you feeling superior. And if we don't? Mrs. Helmsley asked. Then I stop bringing my business to Iron Hollow, Caleb said, and I suggest to every rancher within riding distance that they do the same. See how well your moral standards hold up when the town's got no income. The crowd erupted in angry muttering. Caleb ignored it, turned, and walked back to his wagon. He was halfway home before the shaking started. His hands trembled on the reins, anger and adrenaline draining out of him. He'd never been good at confrontation, preferred to handle problems quietly. But hearing them talk about Elena like that, about the kids, something in him had snapped. When he got home, Elena was in the garden, planting seeds in neat rows. She looked up as he approached. "How was town?" she asked. Caleb hesitated. Then he told her everything. Elena's face went through several expressions: shock, anger, something that might have been fear. When he finished, she stood there holding a trowel, dirt on her hands, looking lost. "You threatened the whole town," she said finally. "Yeah. They're going to hate us even more now. Probably. This is going to make everything harder." "Maybe." Caleb stepped closer. "But I'm not going to stand there and let them tear you down. I'm just not." Elena's eyes glistened. "You don't understand what you've done. These people, they don't forgive. They don't forget. You've made us permanent outsiders." "We already were outsiders," Caleb said. "At least now they know there's consequences." "Consequences for them or for us?" Elena's voice cracked. "Because I'm the one who has to go into town. I'm the one who has to face them when you're out working the ranch. My children are the ones who'll be punished for this. Then we'll find another town, or we'll make do without one." "That's not realistic, and you know it." "What do you want me to do?" Caleb demanded. "Apologize to them? Tell them they're right about you?" "I want you to think before you act." Elena threw the trowel down. "I want you to remember that your pride might feel good in the moment, but it's my family that pays the price." "They're my family too now," Caleb said. "No, they're not." Elena's words were harsh, final. "They're mine. You married me, Caleb, but that doesn't make you their father. It doesn't make us a real family. We're just people sharing a house because it's convenient." The words hit harder than Caleb expected. He stood there, feeling something inside him close off. "Right," he said. "Convenient. I'll remember that." He turned and walked away before she could see how much it stung. Caleb spent the rest of the day working himself half to death, repairing sections of fence that didn't really need fixing, chopping wood until his shoulders screamed. Anything to avoid going back to the house and facing what Elena had said. Just people sharing a house because it's convenient. He'd known that, of course. Known from the start, this wasn't a love match, wasn't even a friendship, really. But hearing her say it out loud, hearing the finality in her voice when she'd said the kids weren't his family, that cut deeper than he'd expected. By the time he came in for dinner, his hands were blistered and his shirt was soaked through with sweat. The kids were already at the table. Elena stood at the stove, her back rigid. "Wash up," she said without turning around. "Food's ready." Caleb washed at the pump, taking longer than necessary. When he finally sat down, Elena served the meal in silence. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, greens from the garden she'd been planting. It smelled good. Tasted like sawdust in his mouth. Clara tried to fill the silence by reading from Treasure Island between bites, but even she could feel the tension. Eventually she gave up, and they all just ate, the scrape of forks against plates the only sound. After dinner, Caleb excused himself and went upstairs. He sat on his bed in the growing dark, staring at nothing. A soft knock came at his door. "What?" he called out. The door cracked open. Ethan stood there, looking uncertain. Can I Can I come in? Caleb nodded. The boy slipped inside and closed the door behind him. Mama and you had a fight, Ethan said. It wasn't a question. We had a disagreement. It's because of what you said in town, isn't it? She told Clara about it while you were out. Caleb sighed. Part of it, yeah. Ethan sat down on the floor, hugging his knees. People were mean to Clara today, when we went to get water from the well. Mrs. Porter's daughter said Mama was a... He stopped, looked down. Said something bad. What'd Clara do? Told her to shut up. Then the girl pushed her and Clara pushed back and Mrs. Porter came out yelling. Ethan's voice got smaller. Said we were wild children with no discipline. Said Mama couldn't raise us proper. Caleb's jaw clenched. That why your mama's upset? Maybe. She wouldn't talk about it. Ethan looked up at him. Are you going to send us away? What? No. Why would you think that? Because everyone keeps saying this won't last. That you'll get tired of us and send us back to town. The boy's eyes were shining. I heard them talking at the general store. Said you'd realize what a burden we are. Caleb got down on the floor next to Ethan. Listen to me. I'm not sending anyone anywhere. You're staying here. All of you. I don't care what people say. Promise? I promise. Ethan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Mama's scared. I can tell. She gets this look when she's scared but trying not to show it. Had the same look after Pa died. Scared of what? That this won't work. That we'll end up back where we were, or worse. Ethan picked at a thread on his pants. She doesn't trust easy. Pa used to say she was like a cat. Took forever to warm up to people, but once she did, she was loyal as anything. Your pa sounds like he was a smart man. He was. Didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. Ethan stood up. I just wanted you to know, even if Mama says things that sound mean, she doesn't always mean them. She's just protecting herself, protecting us. After Ethan left, Caleb sat there thinking about what the boy had said. Elena was scared. Of course she was. She'd lost her husband, nearly lost her kids to starvation, been judged and gossiped about by an entire town. And then some stranger had swooped in and married her, upended her whole life, and expected her to just, what? Be grateful? Trust him? He'd been thinking about this all wrong. He'd been so focused on fixing the problem, on providing a solution, that he hadn't really considered what it felt like from her side. To have no choice but to accept help from someone you barely knew. To marry a man out of desperation instead of love. To raise your kids in a house that belonged to someone else, never knowing if it could all be taken away. Just people sharing a house because it's convenient. Maybe that's all Elena could let herself believe right now. Anything else would hurt too much if it fell apart. Caleb made a decision. He'd give her space. Stop pushing. Stop expecting anything. Just be steady, reliable, present. Let her come to trust him in her own time, if she ever did. The next morning, he came down to find Elena already cooking breakfast. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her shoulders were squared, ready for battle. About yesterday, she started. Don't, Caleb said. You were right. I should have thought before I acted. Elena blinked, clearly thrown. Oh, well, yes, you should have. I'm going to try to be better about that. Better how? Asking you before I go charging off to defend your honor or whatever. Caleb poured himself coffee. This affects you and the kids more than it affects me. I need to remember that. Elena studied him suspiciously, like she was waiting for the catch. That's it? You're just agreeing with me? You were right. Don't make me say it twice. A small smile tugged at her mouth. I might make you say it 3 times, actually. It's a rare enough occurrence. Don't push your luck. They ate breakfast in a silence that felt less hostile than the night before. The kids picked up on it, relaxing slightly. After the meal, Clara helped her mother with dishes while the boys went outside. Caleb was heading to the barn when Elena called after him. Caleb? He turned. She stood in the doorway, twisting a dish towel in her hands. Thank you for what you did in town. Even if it made things harder, I appreciate that you stood up for us. No one's done that in a long time. You're my wife, Caleb said. What else would I do? Most men would have kept their heads down, protected their own reputation. I'm not most men. No, Elena said softly. You're not. She went back inside before he could respond. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a new normal. Elena ran the household with efficiency that impressed him. Nothing wasted, everything in its place, meals that actually tasted like someone cared about making them. The kids thrived. Ethan followed Caleb around the ranch like a shadow, soaking up everything he could learn. Claire read every book she could get her hands on and started writing her own stories on scraps of paper. Even Noah came out of his shell, chattering nonstop about everything he saw and did. But town remained hostile. Elena only went into Iron Hollow when absolutely necessary, and she always came back tense and quiet. The kids stopped going entirely after Noah came home with a split lip. He wouldn't say who hit him, but Caleb had his suspicions. One afternoon, about 6 weeks into the marriage, Caleb was in the barn when he heard a horse approaching. He stepped outside to see a man he didn't recognize, well-dressed, riding an expensive-looking horse. Behind him came a woman in a traveling dress and a younger man carrying a leather satchel. "Can I help you?" Caleb called out. The lead rider dismounted. He was in his 50s, gray-haired and stern-faced, with the kind of bearing that said he was used to being in charge. "You Caleb Mercer?" "I am." "Judge Harold Winters, this is Mrs. Dorothy Simmons from the Territorial Children's Aid Society, and my clerk, Mr. Reed." The judge's voice was clipped, professional. "We're here regarding the children currently in your custody." Caleb's blood went cold. "What about them?" "We've received concerns from several citizens of Iron Hollow about the welfare of the Whitmore children. We're here to conduct an evaluation of the household." "An evaluation," Caleb repeated. "Standard procedure in cases where children's well-being may be at risk." Mrs. Simmons spoke for the first time, her voice prim. "I'm sure you understand our concern. A hasty marriage, rumors of impropriety, questions about the suitability of the home environment. The home environment is fine," Caleb said, fighting to keep his voice level. "The kids are fed, clothed, sheltered, and safe." "We'll determine that," Judge Winters said. "Now, is Mrs. Mercer available?" Caleb wanted to tell them to leave, wanted to run them off his property and never let them near Elena or the kids. But he knew that would only make things worse. "I'll get her," he said. He found Elena in the kitchen, mixing dough. One look at his face and she froze. "What's wrong?" "There's a judge here, and a woman from some children's society. They want to evaluate the household." All the color drained from Elena's face. No, they can't. They can, and they are." Caleb moved closer. "Listen to me. Stay calm. Answer their questions. Show them the house, the kids' rooms, everything. We've got nothing to hide." "They're going to take them." Elena's hand started shaking. "That's what this is. They're going to take my children." "Not if I have anything to say about it." "You don't, though. That's the problem." Elena's voice climbed toward panic. "You're nobody to them. Just some rancher who married a desperate widow. And I'm the woman who couldn't provide for her own kids, who had to trap a man into saving us." "Elena." Caleb took her shoulders, made her look at him. "Breathe. We're going to get through this. Together." She drew in a shaky breath, then another. Slowly the panic receded from her eyes, replaced by something harder. Determination. "All right," she said. "Let's go face them." The evaluation was brutal. Mrs. Simmons went through the house room by room, making notes on a clipboard. She inspected the kitchen, the pantry, the children's bedrooms. She asked invasive questions about sleeping arrangements, discipline methods, religious instruction. "The children share rooms?" she asked, peering into the boy's bedroom. "Yes," Elena said. "Is that a problem?" "It's not ideal. Children should have their own space for proper development." "They have more space here than they've ever had," Elena said, an edge creeping into her voice. "And they're happy. You can ask them yourself." "Oh, we will." Judge Winters interviewed each child separately. Caleb and Elena had to wait outside, forbidden from being present. Caleb paced the porch while Elena sat rigid on the steps, hands clenched in her lap. "This is my fault," she said quietly. "I should have known this would happen. Should have just what? Let your kids starve? Stayed in that falling down shack until winter killed you all?" Caleb shook his head. "You did what you had to do. There's no shame in that. Tell that to them." Elena gestured toward the house. "They see a woman who couldn't make it on her own, who had to resort to whatever they think I resorted to. They see what they want to see. That doesn't make it true." After what felt like hours, Judge Winters emerged with Mrs. Simmons and the clerk. The children remained inside, and Caleb could see Clara watching through the window, her face white with fear. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer," the judge said, "we've completed our preliminary evaluation." "And?" Caleb demanded. "The children are physically well cared for, I'll grant you that. Fed, clean, adequately housed." Judge Winters consulted a paper. "However, there are concerns about the moral atmosphere of the household. The circumstances of your marriage, the scandal surrounding it, the children's exposure to gossip and ostracism, these are not ideal conditions for development." "So what are you saying?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm saying that we need to monitor the situation closely. Mrs. Simmons will return in 1 month for a follow-up evaluation. At that time, we'll determine whether the children can remain in your custody or if alternative arrangements need to be made." "Alternative arrangements?" Elena repeated. "You mean take them away?" "Only if we determine it's in their best interest." "Their best interest?" Elena's voice rose. "I'm their mother. I know what's in their best interest." "Mrs. Mercer, I understand this is difficult." "No, you don't understand anything." Elena stood up, shaking with fury. "You don't understand what it's like to watch your children go hungry because there's no work to be found. To patch their clothes until there's more patches than original fabric. To tell them bedtime stories about full bellies and warm beds because that's all you can give them. And now, when I've finally found a way to actually provide those things, you want to take them away because some bitter old women in town don't approve?" "Mrs. Mercer, please calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down. These are my children." Caleb stepped between them. "What exactly do you need to see in a month? What conditions do we need to meet?" Judge Winters straightened his coat. "The children need to be attending school. They need to be integrated into the community in a respectable manner. They need to demonstrate that they're being raised with proper values and discipline. And frankly, Mr. Mercer, you and your wife need to demonstrate that this marriage is legitimate and not simply a legal maneuver to avoid destitution." "How the hell are we supposed to demonstrate that?" Caleb asked. "That's for you to determine." Judge Winters mounted his horse. 1 month, Mr. Mercer. Use it wisely." They rode off, leaving Caleb and Elena standing in the yard. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Elena turned and ran into the house. Caleb followed. She went straight to the children, gathering them around her. Clara was crying. Ethan looked furious. Noah just seemed confused. "Are they going to take us away?" Clara asked. "No," Elena said fiercely. "I won't let them." "But the judge said—" "I don't care what he said. You're mine, all 3 of you, and nobody's taking you from me." But Caleb could see the fear in her eyes, see the way her hands trembled as she held her children. She was terrified, and they both knew the truth. Judges had power that mothers didn't, especially mothers whose reputations had been destroyed by small-town gossip. That night, after the kids finally fell asleep, Caleb found Elena sitting on the front porch in the dark. "You should be in bed," he said. "Can't sleep." He sat down beside her. For a while they just listened to the night sounds, crickets, distant coyotes, wind moving through the grass. "They're really going to take them, aren't they?" Elena said. "Not if we can help it." "And how do we help it? We can't change what the town thinks of us. Can't make them accept this marriage or stop spreading rumors." "No," Caleb admitted. "But we can do what the judge asked. Get the kids in school, show up at church, be visible and respectable." Elena laughed bitterly. "You want me to parade my children in front of the people who've been tearing us apart? Subject them to more cruelty so we can prove we're upstanding citizens? I don't want any of this. But if it keeps them with you, it won't." Elena's voice was flat. "You weren't in those rooms during the interviews. You didn't hear the questions Mrs. Simmons asked. She's already made up her mind. This follow-up is just a formality." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. I've seen this before, Caleb. Back in town, before we married. There was another widow, Sarah Brennan. She had 2 kids. The church ladies decided she wasn't raising them proper, and within 6 months those kids were gone, sent to an orphanage in Denver. Sarah never got them back." Elena turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "That's what's going to happen to us. And there's nothing we can do to stop it." Caleb wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but he couldn't, because deep down he suspected she was right. "Then we fight," he said. "However we can. Fight how? I don't know yet, but I'll figure something out. Elena shook her head. You can't fix this. You can't throw money at it or intimidate it or solve it with hard work. This is politics and reputation and power, and we don't have any of those things. We have each other, do we? Elena wiped her eyes. We barely know each other, Caleb. We're two people who made a desperate bargain. That's not enough to stand against this. It could be. How? Caleb struggled for an answer. Finally, he said, because we choose it to be. Because instead of just going through the motions, we actually try. Build something real. You mean fall in love? Elena's tone was skeptical. I mean, become a team, partners, people who trust each other and work together. Caleb looked out at the dark land stretching around them. Love might come eventually, or it might not. But respect, loyalty, partnership, those we can build, if we want to. Elena was quiet for so long he thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she said, I'm not good at trusting people. I noticed. And you're not good at asking for help. Also true. So how is this supposed to work? We learn, Caleb said. Make mistakes. Try again. Keep going until we figure it out. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in days. You really believe we can do this? I have to believe it. What's the alternative? She considered that, then she stood up. All right, partners then. For real this time. She held out her hand. Caleb took it, and they shook on it like two people sealing a business deal, which, in a way, they were. The next morning, they made a plan. The kids would start school the following week. Elena and Caleb would attend church that Sunday, sitting in the front row where everyone could see them. They'd make an effort to be visible around town, conducting themselves as a normal married couple would. I hate this, Elena said as they discussed it over breakfast. Giving them what they want. We're not giving them what they want, Caleb said. We're protecting the kids. That's different. Feels the same to me. But she agreed, and that Sunday they all got dressed in their best clothes and headed into Iron Hollow. The kids were nervous, fidgeting the whole ride. Elena sat straight-backed beside Caleb, her expression giving nothing away. When they walked into the church, conversation stopped. Every head turned. Caleb felt Elena's hand tighten on his arm, but she didn't falter. They walked down the center aisle and took seats in the third row. Reverend Thomas stood at the front, clearly flustered by their presence. He fumbled through the opening remarks, then launched into a sermon about sin and redemption that felt pointed enough to draw blood. Elena sat through it with her chin up, never once looking away from the Reverend. The kids sat between her and Caleb, Clara holding Noah's hand while Ethan stared daggers at the back of Mrs. Helmsley's head. After the service, people avoided them like they were carrying plague. Families hustled past without making eye contact. Conversations died when they approached. Only Gunderson acknowledged them with a brief nod before hurrying away. Well, Elena said as they walked back to the wagon. That was humiliating. Yeah, Caleb agreed. Worth it? Don't know yet. They did it again the next Sunday. And the one after that. Each time was slightly less awful than the last, if only because they knew what to expect. The townspeople never warmed to them, but at least they stopped actively fleeing. School was harder. Clara came home the first day with tear-stained cheeks and wouldn't talk about what happened. Ethan got into a fight with an older boy who'd called their mother a whore. The teacher punished Ethan for fighting, but not the other boy for his words. Noah was too young for school yet, which Elena counted as a blessing. I want to pull them out, Elena said after Clara's third day ended with her hiding in her room and crying. This is torture. 1 more week, Caleb said. If it doesn't get better, we'll figure out something else. Like what? I could teach them. I had some schooling. Not much, but enough. Elena looked at him in surprise. You'd do that? Rather do that than watch Clara cry herself to sleep every night. Something shifted in Elena's expression. Thank you, she said quietly. But before the week was up, something unexpected happened. Caleb was in town picking up supplies when he overheard 2 men talking outside the saloon. One of them was Daniel Murphy, a rancher from south of Iron Hollow, who Caleb had done business with a few times. Whole thing's ridiculous, Murphy was saying. Man marries a widow and suddenly everyone acts like it's the end of civilization. You defending Mercer? The other man asked. I'm saying people should mind their own business. Mercer's got a right to marry who he wants, and that woman's done nothing wrong except try to survive. Church ladies don't see it that way. Church ladies wouldn't see sense if it bit them on the ass. Murphy spat into the dirt. My wife knew Henry Whitmore before he died. Said he was a good man and Elena was devoted to him. This idea that she's some kind of scheming temptress is pure horseshit. Caleb stepped around the corner. Murphy. The rancher turned. Mercer, didn't see you there. Heard what you said, appreciate it. Murphy shrugged. Just speaking truth. Don't hold with how this town's treating you and yours. Most people don't share that opinion. Most people are idiots. Murphy considered him. You planning to stick it out, or you going to cut your losses and leave? Not going anywhere. Good. This valley could use more people with backbone. Murphy tipped his hat. You need anything, you let me know. I mean that. It was a small thing. One person speaking up out of dozens who stayed silent or actively hostile, but it felt like something shifting, some tiny crack in the wall of judgment surrounding them. That night, Caleb told Elena about it. One person, she said, out of the whole town. It's a start. Or it's false hope. Maybe, Caleb admitted, but I'll take it anyway. Elena looked at him, something like affection crossing her face. You're stubborn, you know that? Been told. I used to think stubborn was the same as stupid. But with you, she paused. It's different. It's determination, refusing to give up even when things look impossible. Things aren't impossible. They're close. Close isn't the same as done. Elena smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. No, I suppose it's not. The night before Mrs. Simmons was due to return, neither Caleb nor Elena could sleep. They sat at the kitchen table, reviewing everything one last time. The house is clean, Elena said, ticking items off on her fingers. The kids have been attending school. We've been going to church. The pantry is stocked. Their clothes are mended. They're healthy and fed. Elena. And we've been visible in town, conducting ourselves properly, showing that we're a legitimate household. Elena, stop. She looked up at him. What? We've done everything we can. Going over it again won't change anything. I know, I need to feel like I have some control over this. I know. Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. She startled at the touch, but didn't pull away. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. That's what partners do. Elena's fingers tightened around his. I'm scared. Me too. What if it's not enough? What if she takes them anyway? Then we fight harder. Find a lawyer, go over the judge's head, do whatever it takes. You'd really do that? Spend your money, risk everything for children that aren't even yours? Caleb met her eyes. They feel like mine. That's what matters. Elena's breath caught. For a moment, Caleb thought she might cry. Instead, she stood up, came around the table, and did something she'd never done before. She hugged him. It was awkward at first. Neither of them really knew how to do this, how to be close to another person, but slowly, carefully, they figured it out. Elena's head rested against his shoulder. Caleb's arms wrapped around her waist. And for just a moment, in the quiet kitchen with dawn approaching, they weren't two strangers bound by a desperate bargain. They were two people holding each other against the dark. Mrs. Simmons arrived precisely at 10 o'clock. She was accompanied by Judge Winters again, and this time they'd brought someone else, a thin, nervous-looking man introduced as Dr. Pearson, apparently there to assess the children's physical and mental health. The evaluation was even more invasive than the first. Dr. Pearson examined each child, asking them questions about their eating habits, sleep patterns, any illnesses or injuries. Mrs. Simmons went through the house again, this time with a checklist that seemed designed to find fault with anything and everything. They interviewed the children again, questioned Elena and Caleb separately about their marriage, their finances, their plans for the future, asked pointed questions about whether they shared a bed, which they didn't, and what their sleeping arrangements signified about the legitimacy of their union. Through it all, Elena maintained an icy composure that impressed Caleb. She answered every question directly, provided documentation when asked, defended every choice she'd made. She was magnificent, and Caleb found himself seeing her clearly for the first time, not as a desperate widow or a convenient solution to his loneliness, but as a fierce, capable woman who'd been fighting impossible odds for years and somehow hadn't broken. When the evaluation finally ended, Judge Winters, Mrs. Simmons, and Dr. Pearson conferred in low voices while Caleb and Elena waited. "Well," Caleb finally demanded. Judge Winters turned to them. His expression was unreadable. "The children are clearly in good physical health. The household is well managed. You've made efforts to integrate into the community, though with limited success." "Because the community won't let us integrate," Elena said. Nevertheless, Judge Winters consulted his notes. "The question remains whether this marriage is a legitimate union or simply a legal convenience." "Does it matter?" Caleb asked. "Either way, the kids are better off than they were." "It matters because children need stability, Mr. Mercer. If this marriage dissolves in 6 months, where does that leave them?" "It won't dissolve." "How can you be certain?" "Because I don't quit," Caleb said, "and neither does my wife." Mrs. Simmons spoke up. "The children seem attached to you, Mr. Mercer, particularly the boys. That's unexpected." "Why unexpected?" "Given the brief duration of your acquaintance." "Children are adaptable," Elena said, her voice tight. "They respond to kindness and stability. Caleb has provided both." Mrs. Simmons made a note. "Even so, there are concerns. Clara mentioned being unhappy at school. Ethan has been in fights, and the youngest, Noah, seems somewhat withdrawn. Noah is 5 years old and has been through more trauma than most adults face in a lifetime," Elena snapped. "He's withdrawn because he's been hungry, cold, and terrified, not because of anything happening in this house." "Mrs. Mercer, please." "No. You want to judge us? Fine. But judge us on what we're actually doing, not on town gossip and your own assumptions." Judge Winters held up a hand. "Mrs. Mercer, I understand you're upset, but losing your temper won't help your case." Elena clamped her mouth shut, clearly fighting for control. The judge looked at his colleagues, then back at Caleb and Elena. "We need to confer privately. Please wait outside." They waited on the porch. Elena paced. Caleb stood still, every muscle tense. The children watched from the barn where they'd been told to stay out of the way. After 15 minutes that felt like hours, the door opened. Judge Winters stepped out. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer," he said, "we've reached a decision." Elena's hand found Caleb's and gripped it hard enough to hurt. He squeezed back, anchoring her. Judge Winters cleared his throat. "After careful consideration and consultation with Mrs. Simmons and Dr. Pearson, we've determined that the children may remain in your custody." The relief that flooded through Caleb was so intense, it made him dizzy. Beside him, Elena made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "However," the judge continued, his voice stern, "this decision is conditional. We'll be conducting quarterly evaluations for the next year. Any sign that the children's welfare is being compromised, any indication that this household is unstable, and we will revisit the custody arrangement. Do you understand?" "Yes," Caleb said. "We understand," Elena managed, her voice shaking. "Additionally, the children must continue attending school. Regular attendance, no exceptions barring genuine illness. And I strongly suggest you both make a greater effort to establish yourselves as respectable members of this community." "We've been trying," Elena said. "Try harder." Mrs. Simmons stepped forward, her expression severe. "I'm not convinced this marriage is anything more than a legal arrangement, but Dr. Pearson believes the children are genuinely thriving under your care. That's the only reason we're leaving them with you." "Then we're grateful for Dr. Pearson's assessment," Caleb said evenly. Mrs. Simmons sniffed. "See that you remain worthy of his faith. Good day, Mr. and Mrs. Mercer." The three of them mounted their horses and rode off. Caleb and Elena stood frozen on the porch, still holding hands, watching until they disappeared over the ridge. Then Elena's knees gave out. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground, supporting her weight as she sagged against him. She was shaking all over, great tremors running through her body. "They're staying," she whispered. "They're really staying." "They're staying," Caleb confirmed. I was so sure." "I know." Elena pulled back enough to look at him, and he saw tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of fear or despair. These were pure relief, the kind that came after holding yourself together so long you forgot what letting go felt like. "Thank you," she said. "I know I've said it before, but thank you. For all of this. For fighting for them. For us." "Elena," but she was already calling for the children, her voice breaking with emotion. They came running from the barn, Clara in the lead with her brothers right behind her. "Mama?" Clara asked, eyes wide with fear. "What happened? Are they—" "You're staying," Elena said, dropping to her knees and pulling all three children into her arms. "You're staying with me, all of you. They said you can stay." The children erupted into questions and exclamations, all talking over each other. Noah started crying, which set off Clara, which somehow made Ethan's face crumple even though he was clearly trying to be brave. Elena held them all, rocking slightly, whispering reassurances. Caleb watched from a few feet away, feeling like an intruder on a private moment. But then Ethan looked up and held out a hand to him. "Come here," the boy said. Caleb hesitated. "This is your family moment. I don't need to keep—" "Your family too," Ethan insisted. "Right, Mama?" Elena looked up at Caleb, her eyes still wet. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she nodded. "Yes, he is." Caleb joined them, and suddenly he was part of the embrace, surrounded by arms and bodies, and the overwhelming sensation of being needed. Wanted, even. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely foreign to him. They stayed like that until the children's emotions settled and they started asking practical questions about school and what the judge had said, and whether this meant things would be different now. "Things will be exactly the same," Elena told them. "You'll keep going to school, being good, doing your chores. Nothing changes except now we know for certain you're staying." "What about the people in town?" Clara asked quietly. "Will they still be mean?" "Some of them probably," Caleb said honestly. "But that's their problem, not yours." "But it feels like our problem when they say horrible things," Clara said. "I know, and I'm sorry about that, but you can't control what other people think or say. You can only control how you respond." Caleb looked at each of the children in turn. "You're good kids, smart, kind, brave. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth worrying about." "That's easy to say," Ethan pointed out. "You're right. It is. And I know it's harder to actually live by." Caleb straightened up. "But I promise you this, anyone who has a problem with you or your mama will have to go through me first." "Like a bodyguard?" Noah asked, eyes lighting up. "Something like that." "That's so cool," Noah breathed. Elena laughed through her tears. "Go on, all of you. Go play or read or do something that isn't standing around watching adults cry." The children scattered, their energy returning now that the crisis had passed. Elena stood, wiping her face with the corner of her apron. "I'm a mess," she said. "You're allowed to be. I don't like being weak." "That wasn't weakness. That was being human." Elena looked at him. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I just say things and hope they make sense." She smiled, really smiled, and Caleb felt something shift in his chest. She was beautiful when she smiled like that. He'd noticed she was attractive before, in an abstract way, but this was different. This made him want to keep making her smile, keep finding ways to put that light in her eyes. Dangerous territory, he thought, but he didn't step back. That night at dinner, the mood was lighter than it had been in weeks. The children told stories and joked and behaved like normal kids instead of frightened refugees. Elena laughed at something Noah said, and the sound was so genuine it startled everyone at the table. "What?" she asked, noticing their stares. "Nothing," Clara said quickly. "It's just, you seem happy, Mama." "I am happy. Today was a good day." "We should have more good days," Noah declared. "I like good days better than bad days." "That's very wise, Noah," Caleb said solemnly. "I know. I'm very smart. And very humble," Ethan added sarcastically. Noah threw a piece of bread at his brother. Elena started to scold him, then seemed to change her mind and just shook her head, still smiling. After the children went to bed, Caleb and Elena sat on the porch like they'd gotten in the habit of doing. The nights were getting warmer, spring fully settling into the valley. "I keep waiting to wake up and find out this was all a dream," Elena said, "that we're still in the shack, still hungry, still desperate." "Not a dream. This is real. I know. But it doesn't feel real yet. Feels like borrowed time." "Maybe it is," Caleb said. "Maybe all of life is borrowed time. That doesn't make it less worth living." Elena looked at him. "You have an odd way of seeing things. Is that good or bad?" "I'm not sure yet." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night. Then Elena said, "Can I ask you something?" "Do you regret it, marrying me?" Caleb considered the question seriously. No. Do you regret marrying me? Some days I think I should. This has made everything more complicated. Elena drew her knees up to her chest. But no, I don't regret it. You've given my children something I couldn't. Safety, security, a future. That's worth any amount of complication. Is that all I've given them? Elena glanced at him. What do you mean? You said safety and security, but I've seen the way they look at me now, especially Ethan. That's not just gratitude for a roof over his head. That's something else. He sees you as a father, Elena said quietly. We're the closest thing to one he's had in a long time. Henry was gone so much, even before he died. Ethan barely knew him. And that doesn't bother you? Why would it? Because I'm not his father. I'm just... Caleb struggled for words. I'm just the man who happened to be there. You're the man who chose to be there, Elena corrected. That's different. That matters. She paused. Henry loved us, but he was never really present, always chasing the next job, the next opportunity. Said he was doing it for us, and maybe he was, but... She shook her head. You're here. You show up. You teach Ethan things and listen when Clara reads and make Noah laugh. That's what being a father actually is. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. The idea of being a father to these children was both terrifying and deeply appealing. What about you? Elena asked. Do you see them as your children? I don't know what I see them as, Caleb admitted. I never thought I'd have kids. Spent so long alone I figured that ship had sailed. But now, yeah, they feel like mine, even though I have no right to claim them. You have every right, Elena said firmly. You married their mother. You're raising them. That makes them yours just as much as if they shared your blood. The words settled over Caleb like a blanket. You really believe that? I do. They looked at each other and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe. An acknowledgement that this thing they'd started as pure survival was becoming something deeper, more real. Elena, Caleb started, then stopped, not sure what he was trying to say. What? I want you to know that I'm in this. For real. Not just until the evaluations are over or until things get easier. I'm in it for as long as you'll have me. Elena's breath caught. That's a big commitment for someone who barely knows me. I know enough. And I want to know more. Why? Because you're... Caleb searched for the right words. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. You're smart and stubborn, and you don't take anybody's nonsense. You love your kids so fiercely it scares me a little. And when you smile, really smile, not that polite thing you do for strangers, it's like watching the sun come out. Elena stared at him. Caleb, you don't have to say anything back. I just wanted you to know. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. But Elena shook her head. No, you said something real, so I should too. She took a breath. When Henry proposed, it was practical. We liked each other well enough, and he needed a wife and I needed security. There was some affection, but it was comfortable, safe. What you just said, that wasn't safe. That was honest and a little bit scary, and I don't know how to respond to that. You don't have to respond. I'm not asking for anything. But you are. You're asking me to trust that this is real, that you won't change your mind, that... Elena's voice cracked. I've been hurt before, Caleb. Not by Henry, but by life. By people who made promises they didn't keep. I'm not good at trust. I know. So what do? We keep going, Caleb said. One day at a time. No pressure, no expectations, just showing up for each other. Elena nodded slowly. I can do that. I think. That's all I'm asking. But that night, as Caleb lay in bed, he admitted to himself that it wasn't all he was asking. He wanted more. Wanted Elena to look at him the way she looked at her children, with fierce, protective love. Wanted to know what it felt like to be let all the way into her heart instead of just standing at the doorway. But wanting and having were different things, and Caleb had learned patience over long, lonely years. He could wait. The next few weeks brought unexpected changes. True to his word, Daniel Murphy started spreading a different narrative about the Mercers around town. He told anyone who would listen that Caleb was a good man who'd done a noble thing, and that Elena was a devoted mother who deserved respect, not judgment. It didn't change everyone's minds. Mrs. Helmsley and her circle remained hostile, but a few people started to soften. The woman who ran the general store stopped glaring at Elena when she came in. A farmer named Roberts tipped his hat to Caleb one day and actually meant it. Small things, but they added up. School remained difficult for the children, but Clara started fighting back in her own way, with words instead of tears. When a girl said something cruel about her mother, Clara responded with a calm, cutting observation about the girl's own family that left the bully speechless. Ethan's teacher started praising his work, saying he had a natural aptitude for mathematics. Even Noah, who was too young for formal school, was learning his letters from Clara in the evenings. The household found its rhythm. Elena managed the inside with the same fierce efficiency she brought to everything. Caleb taught Ethan ranch work in the mornings before school. Clara helped with cooking and started a small garden of her own. Noah shadowed whoever would let him, chattering constantly and asking 1,000 questions a day. And slowly, carefully, Caleb and Elena learned how to be partners. It started with small things. Elena asking Caleb's opinion on where to plant the vegetable garden. Caleb checking with Elena before making a large purchase for the ranch. Them working together to solve a problem with the chicken coop instead of one of them just handling it alone. They learned each other's rhythms and habits. Caleb discovered that Elena woke up grumpy and needed coffee before she could handle conversation. Elena learned that Caleb got restless if he stayed inside too long and needed to work with his hands. They figured out how to share space without crowding each other, how to disagree without it turning into a fight, how to support each other in front of the children even when they didn't see eye to eye. It wasn't perfect. They still clashed sometimes. Elena's pride and Caleb's stubbornness made for some spectacular arguments. But they were learning to fight fair, to apologize when they were wrong, to meet in the middle. One evening, about a month after the evaluation, Caleb came in from the barn to find the house in chaos. Noah was crying, Clara was trying to calm him down, and Ethan stood in the corner looking guilty. Elena was in the kitchen, slamming pots around with more force than necessary. "What happened?" Caleb asked. "Noah broke Mama's good bowl," Claire reported, "the blue one that was her grandmother's. He was trying to help set the table, and it slipped." Caleb looked at Noah, who was hiccuping through his tears. "Was it an accident?" Noah nodded frantically. "Where's your mama?" "In the kitchen. She told us to leave her alone." Caleb found Elena standing at the counter, staring at the pieces of broken pottery laid out in front of her. Her shoulders were shaking. "Elena?" "It was the only thing I had left from her," Elena said, her voice thick. "My grandmother. She died when I was 10, and my mother gave me this bowl, and I've kept it safe all these years, through everything, and now it's—" She couldn't finish. Caleb moved closer. "Noah feels terrible." "I know. It was an accident. I'm not angry at him." "Then what are you angry at?" "Everything." Elena's voice rose. "I'm angry that this stupid bowl mattered so much. I'm angry that I can't even keep one precious thing safe. I'm angry that—" She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. "I'm angry that I'm crying over a bowl when I should be grateful my children are safe and fed and here." "You can be both," Caleb said gently, grateful and sad at the same time. "It's just a bowl." "No, it's not. It was a connection to someone you loved. You're allowed to mourn that." Elena lowered her hands. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy. "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't. I try to imagine what I'd want to hear if I was hurting." Elena looked at the broken pieces again. "I should go tell Noah I'm not mad at him. He must be terrified." "Wait." Caleb picked up the largest piece. "You know, I've seen people mend broken pottery before. Use some kind of glue, make it whole again. It won't be the same, but it would still exist," Elena finished, "still be usable." "Yeah." Elena considered this. "You'd help me fix it?" "Of course. Even though it's just a bowl." "It's not just a bowl to you. That makes it matter." Elena's face did something complicated. Then she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. It was quick, almost chaste, but it sent electricity through Caleb's whole body. "Thank you," she said softly. She went to comfort Noah while Caleb stood there, one hand pressed to where her lips had touched his skin, feeling like something fundamental had just shifted between them. They mended the bowl together over the next few evenings, using egg white mixed with ash as a primitive glue. It was painstaking work, fitting the pieces back together, holding them until the adhesive set. The children watched with fascination, asking questions about how it worked. It won't be as strong as it was, Caleb warned as they placed the final piece. That's all right, Elena said. Nothing that's been broken is ever quite the same, but that doesn't mean it isn't still valuable. She was looking at the bowl, but Caleb had the feeling she was talking about more than pottery. When the bowl was finished, cracked but whole, Elena placed it on the mantel where everyone could see it. Why are you putting it up there? Claire asked. Aren't you going to use it? I'm going to look at it, Elena said. And remember that broken things can be mended. They might not be perfect, but they can still be beautiful. That night, Caleb found himself thinking about the bowl, about how Elena had trusted him with something precious to her, about how fixing it together had felt like fixing something else entirely, some crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. The spring turned to summer, and with it came the first quarterly evaluation. Mrs. Simmons arrived without warning one morning, clearly hoping to catch them unprepared. Instead, she found a well-run household with clean, happy children and a couple who had learned to work as a team. She interviewed everyone again, inspected the house, reviewed the children's school attendance. Through it all, she maintained her severe expression, giving nothing away. The children seem well, she finally admitted, as if the words pained her. They are well, Elena said. And you and Mr. Mercer, your marriage appears more, Mrs. Simmons struggled for words, established than it was before. We've had time to adjust to each other, Caleb said carefully. Mrs. Simmons made notes. The school reports some improvement in Claire's behavior, though Ethan still has a tendency toward fighting. Only when someone insults his mother or siblings, Elena said, and only after trying words first. Fighting is never acceptable. Neither is cruelty, Caleb said, but the kids getting insulted doesn't seem to make it into the school reports. Mrs. Simmons' mouth thinned. Nevertheless, Mr. Mercer, violence is not the answer. Then maybe the school should address the cause instead of just punishing the response. They went back and forth like that for another hour before Mrs. Simmons finally declared the evaluation complete. I'll submit my report to Judge Winters. Barring any significant changes, I see no reason to alter the current custody arrangement. It wasn't warm or friendly, but it was enough. After she left, Elena sagged with relief. 3 more of these to go, she said. We'll make it through, Caleb assured her. I hate that we have to keep proving ourselves. I know, but it's the price we pay. Elena looked at him. Is it worth it? Dealing with all this scrutiny and judgment? Caleb didn't even have to think about it. Yes. Why? Because at the end of the day, those kids are safe, and you're not carrying the weight of the world alone anymore. That's worth any amount of bureaucratic nonsense. Elena stepped closer to him. You know, when we first married, I thought you were doing this out of pity, or loneliness, or some misguided sense of duty. And now? Now I think you're doing it because you actually care. About me. About the children. About this. She gestured around them. Family we're building. You're right, Caleb said simply. I care too, Elena said quietly. More than I expected to. More than I thought I could. Is that so bad? It's terrifying. Caring means being vulnerable. And I've spent so long protecting myself. I know, but you don't have to protect yourself from me. Elena looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. Promise me something. If you ever change your mind about this, about us, tell me. Don't just let it fade away or pretend everything's fine when it's not. I can handle honesty. I can't handle being left in the dark. Caleb took her hands. I promise. But Elena, I'm not going to change my mind. This is what I want. You, the kids, this life. It's what I want. Today you want it, but what about a year from now? 5 years? 10? Still going to want it. You can't know that. Yes, I can, because I've lived without it, and I never want to go back. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in. You're already doing it. Every day. A little bit more. That's all it takes. She leaned her forehead against his chest. Caleb wrapped his arms around her, and they stood there in the quiet house, holding each other. This wasn't what I expected when I said yes to marrying you, Elena said, her voice muffled against his shirt. What did you expect? A business arrangement, separate lives under one roof, polite strangers who happen to share a name. And what is it now? Elena pulled back to look at him. I don't know yet, but it's more. It's. She paused, then said something that clearly cost her. It's starting to feel real. Like maybe we could actually be happy together. Maybe? Caleb smiled. I'm already happy. Are you? Happier than I've ever been. You and those kids, you make this house feel like a home instead of just a building I sleep in. Elena touched his face, her fingers gentle. You're a good man, Caleb Mercer. Just good? She laughed, and the sound made his heart skip. Don't get greedy. But then she kissed him, properly this time, not just a quick peck on the cheek. It was soft and tentative and over too quickly, but it was real. A choice, not an obligation. When she pulled back, Caleb was too stunned to speak. Was that okay? Elena asked, looking uncertain. That was okay. Good, because I'd like to do it again sometime. Anytime you want. Elena smiled, and in that moment, Caleb understood what it meant to fall in love with someone you'd married for all the wrong reasons. It was messy and backward, and nothing like the stories made it sound. But it was real, and it was theirs, and that made it perfect in its own imperfect way. That summer, the ranch thrived. The cattle fattened on good grass. The garden produced more vegetables than they could eat. The children grew taller and stronger, their faces filling out, their laughter coming easier. And Caleb and Elena learned to be married in more than just name. They still slept in separate rooms, some things took time, but they held hands when they thought the kids weren't looking. Stole kisses in the barn or by the creek, found excuses to be near each other. It wasn't perfect. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with trust and communication. Elena had bad days where she withdrew into herself, convinced this was all too good to last. Caleb had moments of doubt where he wondered if he was enough, if he could really be what this family needed. But they kept showing up, kept trying, kept choosing each other and the life they were building together. And slowly, day by day, the arrangement stopped feeling like an arrangement and started feeling like exactly what it was, a family. By the time autumn arrived, painting the valley in shades of gold and rust, the Mercer household had found a rhythm that felt almost natural. Almost, because there were still moments when Caleb would catch himself wondering if this was real or just some elaborate dream he'd wake from to find himself alone again in his empty house. But then Noah would come tearing through the kitchen chasing one of the barn cats, or Clara would ask him to listen to a story she'd written, or Ethan would show him a fence repair he'd done completely on his own, and Caleb would remember this was real. Messy and complicated and nothing like he'd imagined, but real. The second quarterly evaluation came and went with less drama than the first. Mrs. Simmons was still severe, still skeptical, but even she couldn't deny that the children were thriving. Clara had stopped getting into conflicts at school entirely, having discovered that being smarter than her tormentors was better revenge than any insult. Ethan had grown 3 inches and could do the work of a man half again his age. Noah had started reading on his own, sounding out words with fierce determination. I still have concerns about the longevity of this arrangement, Mrs. Simmons said, as she prepared to leave. Then keep having them, Elena replied, her voice pleasant but with steel underneath. We'll still be here in 3 months when you come back, and 3 months after that, and every 3 months until you finally accept that we're not going anywhere. Mrs. Simmons's mouth pinched, but she nodded and rode off. You enjoyed that, Caleb said once she was out of earshot. Immensely, Elena admitted. Is that wrong? Probably not. As the days grew shorter and colder, Caleb noticed Elena getting quieter, more withdrawn. At first he thought it was just the approaching winter, her first winter without the constant fear of freezing or starving. But it was more than that. One night he found her sitting by the fire long after the children had gone to bed, staring into the flames. Can't sleep? He asked. She shook her head. Too much thinking. About what? Elena was quiet for so long Caleb thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, Do you remember what day it is? Caleb thought back. November 8th. Why? It's the anniversary of the day Henry died. 3 years ago tomorrow, he went up the mountain to work timber and never came home. They brought his body down 2 days later. I'm sorry, I didn't know. How could you? I never told you. Elena pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The kids don't remember the exact date, or if they do, they don't mention it. But I remember everything about that day. Caleb sat down beside her. You want to talk about it? There's not much to say. The foreman came to the shack and told me there'd been an accident. A tree fell wrong, caught Henry across the chest. He died instantly, they said, like that was supposed to make it better. Elena's voice was flat, emotionless. And just like that, I was alone with 3 children and no money and no idea how to survive. But you did survive. Barely. That first winter, I thought we'd all freeze to death. The second winter, I thought we'd starve. And this year, she looked at him. This year, I'm sitting in a warm house with a full pantry and my children safe upstairs, and I feel guilty about it. Guilty for what? For being relieved, for being happy. Elena's voice cracked. Henry's been dead 3 years, and I've spent more time thinking about you in the past 6 months than I spent thinking about him in the whole last year of our marriage. What kind of wife does that make me? The human kind, Caleb said gently. Elena, you're allowed to move on. You're allowed to be happy. That doesn't mean you didn't love your husband or that his death didn't matter. But I do feel like I'm betraying him somehow. He's barely cold in his grave, and She gestured between them. Whatever this is. This is your life, Caleb said. A life you deserve to live. Henry would want that for you, wouldn't he? I don't know. Maybe. He wasn't much for talking about feelings. Elena wiped her eyes. He was a good man, Caleb. I want you to know that. He worked hard and he loved us in his way, but he was always chasing something, always sure the next job would be the one that set us up for life, and it was never enough. Some men are like that, always looking ahead instead of seeing what's right in front of them. Are you like that? Caleb considered. I used to be. Spent 10 years building this ranch, telling myself I was working towards something. But I never stopped to ask what that something was. Just kept working because I didn't know what else to do. And now? Now I know what I was working toward. I just didn't realize it until you and the kids showed up. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Her choosing to seek comfort from him, to trust him with her grief and guilt. Thank you for understanding, she said quietly. Always. They sat like that until the fire burned down to embers. Then Elena kissed him goodnight, a soft, sad kiss that tasted like salt from her tears, and went upstairs to her room. Caleb sat alone in the dark, thinking about love and loss and the strange paths life took. He'd never met Henry Whitmore, would never know what kind of man he'd been beyond what Elena told him. But Caleb was grateful to him nonetheless for loving Elena and giving her those 3 children, for being part of the story that led her here. The next day, Elena was quieter than usual, but not withdrawn. She let the children see her sadness without trying to hide it. And when Clara asked if she was thinking about their papa, Elena said yes and told them stories about Henry that made them laugh. He sounds like he was funny, Noah said. He was. He had terrible jokes, but he committed to them so hard you couldn't help laughing. Elena smiled at the memory. He would have liked to see how much you've all grown. Do you think he'd like Caleb? Ethan asked. The question hung in the air. Elena looked at Caleb across the table. I think he would, she said finally. I think he'd be grateful that someone was taking care of his family. We're Caleb's family too now, Noah said matter-of-factly. Right? Right, Elena confirmed. We're a family, all of us together. Something in Caleb's chest tightened at those words. A family. He'd spent so long alone that he'd forgotten what that word really meant. It wasn't just people living under the same roof. It was belonging, being woven together by shared experiences and chosen love. That winter was hard in ways Caleb hadn't anticipated. Not because of cold or hunger. The house was warm and the pantry full. But because living with people meant dealing with their moods and needs and problems in a way he'd never had to before. Clara went through a phase where she was convinced she was a burden and tried to make herself invisible, barely eating and spending all her time in her room. It took Elena 3 weeks of patient conversations to convince her that she was wanted and loved, not just tolerated. Ethan started having nightmares about the judge coming to take them away, waking up screaming in the middle of the night. Caleb would sit with him until he calmed down, sometimes talking, sometimes just being present. Noah caught a fever that lasted a week and had Elena so terrified she barely slept, sitting by his bedside and checking his temperature every hour. When it finally broke, she cried for an hour straight from sheer relief. And through it all, Caleb learned what it meant to be part of a family. It meant putting someone else's needs ahead of your own comfort. It meant staying up all night with a sick child even when you had work to do in the morning. It meant having the same argument 3 times because sometimes people needed to be heard more than they needed solutions. It meant letting go of control and trusting that together you could handle whatever came. It also meant joy in ways he'd never experienced. Noah's laughter when Caleb chased him through the snow. Clara proudly showing him a perfect score on her arithmetic test. Ethan calling him Pa for the first time, accidentally, then going red with embarrassment until Caleb said he liked the sound of it. And Elena. Elena teaching him to dance in the kitchen while dinner cooked, her laugh bright and free. Elena falling asleep against him while they sat by the fire, trusting him enough to let her guard down completely. Elena saying, "I love you," one quiet morning. The words simple and honest and more precious than anything he'd ever been given. The 3rd quarterly evaluation was almost anticlimactic. Mrs. Simmons came, inspected, interviewed, and left with a curt nod that might have been approval. Judge Winters sent a letter 2 weeks later stating that the evaluations would now move to a semi-annual schedule given the clear stability of the household. "We won," Elena said, reading the letter for the 3rd time. "They're backing off." "We won," Caleb agreed. But Elena didn't look happy. She looked scared. "What's wrong?" Caleb asked. "Nothing's wrong. That's the problem." Elena set the letter down. "Everything's going too well. The kids are happy. The town has mostly accepted us. Even the evaluations are easing up. It's too much good all at once." "And you're waiting for it to fall apart. Aren't you?" "No," Caleb said honestly. "I think we've earned this. Every bit of it." "People don't get happy endings just because they've suffered," Elena said. "Life doesn't work that way." "Maybe not. But maybe sometimes people get second chances. And what they do with those chances is what matters." Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something that had clearly been weighing on her. "I want to stop sleeping in separate rooms." Caleb's heart kicked against his ribs. "Yeah?" "Yeah, we're married. We've been married for almost a year now. And I want to be married in every sense of the word, if you do." "I do," Caleb said. "I really do." That night, Elena moved her things into his room. It was awkward at first, both of them hyper-aware of each other, not sure how to navigate this new intimacy. But they figured it out the same way they'd figured out everything else. Slowly, with patience and humor, and the occasional misstep. Spring came again, turning the valley green and bringing new life to the ranch. Caleb hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Good men who didn't care about the gossip and just wanted honest employment. Elena expanded her garden, planting enough vegetables to feed them through the next winter with plenty left over. The children continued to grow and thrive. Clara turned 12 and started writing a novel. Terrible and melodramatic and absolutely sincere. Ethan decided he wanted to be a rancher like Caleb and started saving his earnings from odd jobs to buy his own cattle someday. Noah lost his first tooth and insisted on showing it to everyone who came to the house. The town slowly, grudgingly came around. Murphy's continued advocacy helped. So did the fact that the Mercer kids were consistently the best-behaved, hardest-working students in school. People started nodding to Elena when she came to town. Mrs. Porter actually invited her to a quilting circle. Elena declined, but appreciated the gesture. Even Mrs. Helmsley softened, though she'd never admit it. When her husband took ill and none of the church ladies had time to help, it was Elena who showed up with soup and medicine and sat with the old woman for an afternoon. They didn't become friends, but there was a grudging respect between them after that. One afternoon in late May, Caleb was in the barn when Daniel Murphy rode up with another man Caleb didn't recognize. "Mercer," Murphy called out, "got someone who wants to meet you." The stranger dismounted, a young man, maybe 25, dressed in traveling clothes that had seen better days. "This is James Whitmore," Murphy said. "Henry's younger brother." Caleb's stomach dropped. He'd known Henry had family somewhere. Elena had mentioned a brother once, but they'd never made contact. Now here he was, and Caleb had no idea what that meant. "Mr. Mercer," James said, extending his hand. "I've heard a lot about you." Caleb shook it warily. "From who?" "Murphy here mostly, and some folks in town. Sounds like you've been taking care of my brother's family." "They're my family now," Caleb said carefully. "So I understand. That's actually why I'm here." James shifted his weight. "See, I only just found out Henry died. Been working out California way, didn't get the news until a few months back. Came as soon as I could to check on Elena and the kids. They're doing fine. I can see that. Murphy's been filling me in on everything that happened. How you married Elena, took the kids in, fought off the whole town, basically. James smiled, but it was strained. Sounds like quite the story. It's not a story. It's just life. Fair enough. James glanced toward the house. I'd like to see them. The kids, I mean. And Elena. If that's all right with you. It's not really up to me, Caleb said, though every instinct screamed to refuse. We should ask Elena. They found Elena in the kitchen, kneading bread dough. She looked up when they entered, and the color drained from her face. James, she whispered. Elena. He took a step forward, stopped. It's good to see you. What are you doing here? Heard about Henry, came to pay my respects, and to see how you and the kids are managing. We're managing fine, Elena said, her voice gaining strength. Better than fine, actually. I can see that. James looked around the kitchen, at the clean floors, the full pantry, the warmth and order of it all. This is quite different from the last place I saw you living. A lot of things are different now. An uncomfortable silence fell. Caleb started to excuse himself, but Elena caught his hand. Stay, she said. Then to James, Caleb is my husband now. Anything you want to say to me, you can say in front of him. James nodded slowly. All right then. I'll be direct. I came here prepared to take the kids back with me. Elena's grip on Caleb's hand turned painful. What? They're my blood, Elena. My brother's children. I thought, when I heard Henry was dead and you were struggling, I thought the right thing would be to take them, raise them myself, give them a stable home. They have a stable home, Elena said, her voice shaking with fury. They have a home and a family and everything they need right here. I can see that now. Murphy made it pretty clear on the ride over. James held up his hands. I'm not here to fight you, Elena. I'm here to do right by Henry's memory. And honestly, after hearing what you've been through, what you've done to keep those kids safe and together, I think taking them away from you would be the opposite of right. The tension in the room eased slightly. Elena's grip on Caleb's hand loosened. So you're not going to try to take them? She asked. No, but I would like to know them. Be part of their lives if you'll let me. They're the only family I have left. Elena looked at Caleb. He could see the question in her eyes. What do you think? They should know their uncle, Caleb said quietly. If that's what you want. It is, Elena said. She turned back to James. You can meet them, but I need you to understand something. Caleb is their father now, not legally, not by blood, but in every way that matters. He's the one who feeds them and teaches them and sits up with them when they're sick. If you're going to be part of their lives, you need to respect that. I do, James said. And for what it's worth, thank you for taking care of them when I couldn't, when I didn't even know they needed taking care of. The children came home from school an hour later and were shocked to meet an uncle they'd only heard about in stories. There was awkwardness at first, but James was patient and kind, asking questions and listening to their answers. By dinner, Noah was chattering at him nonstop. Clara was shyly showing him her writing, and even Ethan had warmed up enough to talk about the ranch. James stayed for 3 days, getting to know his niece and nephews and proving himself to be a decent man who genuinely cared about their well-being. When he left, he promised to visit again in a few months and to write letters in between. That went better than I expected, Elena said as they watched him ride away. You were scared, Caleb observed. Terrified. I thought he was going to try to take them, and for a moment there I thought about running, just grabbing the kids and disappearing before he could do anything legal. But you didn't. No, because you were there, and I knew we could face it together. Elena leaned against him. That's what being married really is, isn't it? Not romance or passion or any of that. It's having someone to face the hard things with. Someone who makes you brave enough to stand your ground instead of running. It's that, Caleb agreed, but it's also the romance and passion and all the rest. Elena laughed. When did you become such a romantic? When I married a woman who makes me want to be one. She kissed him, right there in the yard where anyone could see, and Caleb didn't care who might be watching or what they might think. This was his wife, his family, his life, and he'd be damned if he hid any of it. The final evaluation came in August, right as the valley turned gold with late summer heat. Mrs. Simmons arrived looking tired and older than Caleb remembered. The inspection was perfunctory, her questions brief. When it was over, she sat at the kitchen table and accepted the coffee Elena offered her. "I'm recommending that the evaluation cease," she said without preamble. "This household is stable. The children are thriving. There's no reason to continue monitoring the situation." Elena's hand trembled as she set down her cup. "Really? Really? You've proven yourself, Mrs. Mercer. Both of you have." Mrs. Simmons looked at Caleb. "I'll admit, I had my doubts about this arrangement. It seemed unconventional, but I was wrong. You've built something real here, something good." "Thank you," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "Don't thank me. Thank yourselves for doing the work." Mrs. Simmons stood. "I won't be bothering you again. Raise those children well." After she left, Elena collapsed into Caleb's arms, sobbing with relief. The children came running, alarmed by their mother's tears, and Caleb gathered them all close. "It's over," he told them. "No more evaluations. No more people judging us or threatening to separate us. We're free." "Really free?" Noah asked. "Really free." They celebrated that night with a special dinner: Clara's favorite roast chicken, Ethan's favorite potatoes, Noah's favorite apple pie. They ate and laughed and told stories, and for the first time since this all began, there was no shadow hanging over them, no fear waiting around the corner, just a family enjoying a meal together. Later, after the children were asleep, Caleb and Elena sat on the porch watching the stars. "Do you ever think about how we started?" Elena asked. "Sometimes. Why?" "Because I want to remember. Not just the good parts now, but all of it. The desperation and fear and not knowing if we'd survive. Because that's what makes this matter." She gestured to the house, the land, the life they'd built. "We could have given up. We could have let the town win, let the fear win. But we didn't. We chose to fight, chose to trust each other even when it was hard, chose to build something real out of something that started as pure survival." Caleb pulled her close. "Best decision I ever made, marrying you. Even though it was a disaster at first?" "Especially because it was a disaster at first. Easy things don't mean as much." Elena tilted her face up to look at him. "I love you. I don't know if I've said it enough, but I do. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone." "I love you too. You and those kids. You're everything to me." "Good, because you're stuck with us now." "That's exactly where I want to be." They stayed out there until the night grew cold, wrapped in each other and the quiet satisfaction of having survived something that should have broken them, but instead made them stronger. The years that followed weren't perfect. Life never is. There were hard times, droughts that threatened the ranch, illnesses that scared them, arguments that left them not speaking for days. Clara went through a rebellious phase at 15 that tested everyone's patience. Ethan broke his arm learning to break horses and gave Elena 3 months of constant worry. Noah struggled with reading until they finally found a teacher who understood how his mind worked differently. But there were good times too. So many good times they blurred together into a tapestry of normal, everyday happiness. Clara's first published story in a regional magazine. Ethan buying his first cow with money he'd saved for 2 years. Noah learning to play the harmonica and driving everyone crazy until he actually got good at it. Elena's garden becoming famous enough that people came from other towns to buy her vegetables. Caleb teaching all 3 children to ride and watching them grow confident and capable. And through it all, Caleb and Elena built a marriage that was nothing like what either of them expected. It wasn't the passionate love story Clara read about in her books. It wasn't the practical arrangement it had started as either. It was something in between and beyond, a partnership forged in hardship and tempered by choice. A love that grew not in spite of the difficult beginning, but because of it. Because here's what Caleb learned over those years. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays when things get hard, who chooses you day after day, even when easier options exist. Clara, Ethan, and Noah weren't his children by birth, but they were his in every way that mattered. He taught them to work and to think and to stand up for themselves. He dried their tears and celebrated their victories and loved them with a fierceness that surprised him. And Elena. Elena was the home he'd been building toward all those years without knowing it. Not the house, or the land, or the wealth. Her. The way she challenged him and supported him and made him laugh when he took himself too seriously. The way she trusted him with her children and her heart and her fears. The way she chose him every single day, just like he chose her. On their 10th anniversary, Caleb woke before dawn and went downstairs to find Elena already in the kitchen, making coffee. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Didn't want to. I was thinking about the first time you left food on my doorstep." She smiled at the memory. "I thought you were crazy, some rich rancher with nothing better to do than play savior to a desperate widow. I thought I was just being practical, saw a problem, found a solution." "Is that still what you think this is? A solution to a problem?" "No. Now I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me. To all of us." Elena moved into his arms. "Me too. And I want you to know I'm grateful. Not just for the house or the security or any of that. I'm grateful that you saw me when I was invisible, that you fought for us when no one else would, that you loved my children before you loved me and made us all feel worthy of being chosen." "Elena," let me finish. "I'm grateful for all of that, but I'm most grateful that you taught me something I'd forgotten. That it's okay to need people, to accept help, to let someone else carry part of the weight. I spent so long being strong and independent and refusing to be vulnerable that I'd forgotten what it felt like to share a life with someone. You reminded me. You made it safe to trust again." Caleb kissed her forehead. "You taught me things too, about what matters, about the difference between existing and actually living, about what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself." "We taught each other," Elena said. "That's what marriage is supposed to be, right? Two people making each other better. If it is, we're doing it right." They stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding each other as the sun came up over the valley they'd made their home. Upstairs, their children slept peacefully, safe and loved and free. Outside, the ranch waited for another day of work and life, and all the small moments that added up to something meaningful. Caleb thought about the man he'd been 10 years ago, lonely, isolated, convinced that solitude was the same as strength. That man would have been terrified by all of this. The noise and mess and constant needs of a family. The vulnerability of loving people who could hurt you just by leaving. The responsibility of being someone others depended on. But Caleb wasn't that man anymore. He'd been changed by a desperate widow who refused to quit, by 3 children who taught him that love was a choice you made every day, by the slow transformation of a house into a home. And if he could go back and tell his younger self anything, it would be this: the things that scare you most are often the things you need most. Loneliness feels safe because it can't hurt you, but it can't heal you either. Real life, messy, complicated, vulnerable life requires letting people in, requires risking pain for the chance at joy, requires understanding that broken things can be mended, that people can change, and that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. Years later, when Caleb was old and gray and his children had children of their own, someone would ask him if he regretted anything about his life. He'd think about that question for a long time, running through decades of memories, the good and the bad, the triumphs and the failures, all of it. And then he'd say no. He didn't regret a single moment, not the loneliness that drove him to help a stranger, not the desperate bargain that became a marriage, not the judgment and struggle and fear, not any of it. Because all of it, every hard, messy, imperfect piece, had led him here, to a life full of people who loved him, to children who called him Pa and meant it, to a wife who'd chosen him every day for decades and still looked at him like he was worth choosing, to a home that wasn't just a building but a living thing made of laughter and arguments and shared meals and accumulated memories. That cold Wyoming morning when he'd watched Elena serve her starving children potato peels and call it a feast, Caleb had seen something that broke his heart open. He hadn't known it then, but that moment had saved him just as much as his intervention had saved her. Because in choosing to help her, he'd chosen to rejoin the human race, to stop hiding behind walls of self-sufficiency and admit that he needed connection just as much as anyone else. The truth Caleb learned, the truth he'd want everyone to know, was this: you can't save someone and remain unchanged yourself. The act of reaching out, of offering help, of choosing to care about another person's suffering, that transforms you. Makes you vulnerable and strong at the same time. Opens you up to hurt, but also to joy. And sometimes, in the very act of trying to rescue someone else, you end up rescuing yourself. Elena hadn't just needed his help. She'd needed to be seen as a person, not a charity case. To be respected for her strength instead of pitied for her weakness. To be given a chance to rebuild without judgment or conditions. And in seeing her that way, in offering her partnership instead of pity, Caleb had created the foundation for something real. That was the thing about second chances. They only worked if you approached them with honesty. If Caleb had married Elena out of pure obligation, or if she'd accepted out of nothing but desperation, it would have fallen apart. But they'd been honest, brutally, awkwardly honest, about what they wanted and needed and feared. And that honesty had allowed trust to grow where it had no right to exist. The frontier was a hard place. It broke people. It took everything you had and demanded more. But it also had a way of stripping life down to what mattered. Out here, you couldn't hide behind social niceties or pretend to be something you weren't. You either survived together or died alone. Caleb and Elena had chosen to survive together, and in doing so, they'd built something that went beyond survival. They'd created a family, not despite the hardship, but through it. The struggle had forged bonds that never would have formed in easier circumstances. That was the lesson, if there was one. That sometimes the best things in life come from the worst situations. That broken can become beautiful. That desperate bargains can transform into genuine love. That families aren't just born, they're made, one choice at a time, by people who refuse to give up on each other. As Caleb held Elena in their kitchen that anniversary morning, watching the sunrise paint the valley gold, he understood something fundamental about happiness. It wasn't something you achieved and then possessed forever. It was something you built daily through small acts of kindness and courage, through showing up even when it was hard, through choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. The ranch house that had once echoed with emptiness now rang with life. 3 children who'd nearly starved had grown into capable adults who knew their worth. A woman who'd been invisible to her community had become its quiet backbone, the person people turned to when they needed real help instead of empty judgment. And a lonely rancher who'd thought his life was over at 40 had discovered it was just beginning. None of it was perfect. Families never are. There were still arguments and hurt feelings and moments of doubt. But perfection had never been the goal. The goal was to keep showing up, to keep trying, to keep choosing each other and this life they'd built together. And on that morning, 10 years after a desperate bargain in a dying town, Caleb Mercer knew without question that he would make the same choice again, would marry the struggling widow, take on her children, face down the judgment and fear and uncertainty, would do all of it gladly, knowing where it led. Because the greatest gift Elena and her children had given him wasn't their presence in his house. It was the reminder that he was capable of being needed, that his life could matter to someone beyond himself, that solitude was a poor substitute for connection, no matter how safe it felt. They had saved each other, not in some grand romantic gesture, but in the quiet daily work of building a life together, of learning to trust and compromise and forgive, of choosing partnership over pride and vulnerability over protection. And if that wasn't a happy ending, Caleb didn't know what was. Not the kind where everything was perfect and nothing ever went wrong, but the real kind, where 2 broken people fit their jagged edges together and made something stronger than either could have built alone. Where children grew up knowing they were wanted, where a house became a home because it was filled with people who chose to be there. That was worth everything. Every moment of fear and struggle and doubt, every argument and setback and challenge. All of it led here, to this moment, to this life, to this family. And standing in his kitchen with his wife in his arms and his children asleep upstairs and the Wyoming sun rising over land that had witnessed their transformation, Caleb understood what it meant to be truly wealthy. Not in money or property or possessions, but in the things that actually mattered. Love, family, home. The rest was just details.